The room trembled as the massive hologram flickered in front of them. The dark, jagged ships of the Harbingers slid into view, their forms sleek and intimidating, their engines glowing with an eerie red hue. Their warships were different from anything the galaxy had ever encountered. Fast, deadly, and precise. The once silent space outside the station was now alive with the ominous hum of their engines, their presence sending waves of dread across the room. The Terran Armada, silent and dormant for so many years, now surged to life in an instant. Far's heart raced, and his mind raced even faster. The Senate, the very institution he had served his entire life, would never believe this. They would never accept that humanity. Earth had prepared for the return of such a threat, hiding away for centuries, and then revealing themselves just as the Harbingers made their move. It seemed impossible, even insane. Kyer turned to Far, his face pale, but his resolve hardening. "What now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding before them. Far clenched his fists, his eyes scanning the holographic display. The fleets of the Harbingers were fast approaching. It was clear that their arrival marked the beginning of something far greater than any of them had expected. Far looked at Kyer, then back to the hologram, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. "We need to warn the Senate," Far said, his voice low, but unwavering. "But we need proof, something that will make them understand the gravity of what's coming. The fleet, it's not just about defense anymore. It's about survival." The Senate has always been blind to the bigger picture, too absorbed in its own politics. But now, they have no choice but to face the truth. Kyer nodded, understanding the magnitude of what they were about to undertake. "The Senate's not going to take kindly to this. If we come forward with this, they'll try to cover it up. They'll do everything to hide the truth. How do you plan on getting them to listen?" Far looked over at Admiral Hale, who stood silently, his gaze fixed on the looming Harbinger fleet. The man had been through something unimaginable, and now he was ready to unleash a storm upon the galaxy. "We need something bigger," Far said slowly. "We need to show them the truth, not just through words, but through actions. These Harbingers, they won't stop until every system under Senate control is in their grasp. If we don't act fast, they'll wipe us all out." Hale spoke up, his voice filled with certainty. "The Senate has no choice but to ally with us now. They can't survive without the Terran Armada. But we'll make sure they understand that Earth's fleet is the key to this war, and we will not wait for them to make their move." Kyer turned to the Admiral, his thoughts racing. "What do you need from us?" Hale looked at him, his expression unreadable. "I need you to get the Senate to believe. Show them the fleet. Show them the truth of what they've ignored for centuries. We'll do the rest. Earth is not forgotten, and we're not just here to protect humanity. We're here to save the galaxy." The words hung in the air, heavy with significance. Kyer felt a chill creep down his spine. This wasn't just about saving humanity anymore. This was about saving everything. Far's voice broke the silence, his tone resolute. "Then let's get to work. The Senate needs to hear this before it's too late. We may not have much time." The lights in the station flickered once more as the walls trembled under the rumble of the awakening fleet. Outside, the first of the Harbinger ships began their descent toward Senate space, their engines burning bright in the endless black. Far and Kyer exchanged one last look, knowing the enormity of what was ahead. The station's automated systems were now fully online, and the Terran Armada was ready. Far stepped forward, his fingers poised over the control panel, ready to transmit the message to the Senate. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was sharp. He pressed the button. "Senate transmission. Open." The screen blinked to life. "Senator Far, this is a high-priority communication. Do you have the data we requested?" Far's voice was firm, cutting through the confusion. "This is not a request. This is a warning. A fleet is on the move, and if you don't act fast, the Senate will be destroyed. Humanity is not gone. Earth is not lost. We've been hiding in plain sight, waiting for this moment. The harbingers are coming. You must prepare, or we all fall." There was a brief silence on the other end, and then a voice. Cold, dismissive. "We've heard these stories before, Senator. The Senate has other priorities at the moment. We cannot afford to entertain wild accusations." Farr's hand tightened into a fist. "You have no idea what's coming," he said, his voice now filled with urgency. "And if you don't listen to me, it will be your last mistake." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving nothing but static. Farr's eyes narrowed, a cold fury bubbling inside him. "It's begun," Farr muttered, turning to Admiral Hale. "We need to move fast." Hale nodded, already moving toward the station's main controls. "We'll give them one last chance to wake up. But if they refuse—" Kyer stepped forward, his voice low but fierce. "Then we fight." The station hummed with energy as the Terran Armada prepared to leave. Outside, the Harbinger's fleet was closing in. There was no more time for diplomacy. The fate of the galaxy rested on the decisions made in the coming hours. And the truth was about to come crashing down. The tension inside the station was palpable, thick with uncertainty. Farr stood before the command center, watching the shifting lights on the holoscreens, tracking the movement of the Harbinger fleet. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic silence that enveloped the room. The Senate had dismissed their warning, and now they had no choice but to act. There was no turning back. Kyer's voice broke through his thoughts. "Are we sure they won't listen? I mean, they've ignored everything so far. They think we're just pulling old war stories out of our history." Farr sighed, looking up at the hologram that now displayed the full scope of the Harbinger fleet. Dozens of ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything the galaxy had seen. They were more than just invaders. They were a symbol of humanity's greatest fear: extinction. His hand clenched into a fist again. "They'll listen soon enough. If not, we'll make them listen. This is bigger than just us." A loud chime interrupted his thoughts. The holoscreen flickered again, and the face of a Senate official appeared. She was a familiar face, but Farr could tell from the urgency in her eyes that something had changed. The cold dismissiveness had melted away, replaced by the same dread that Farr had been carrying for hours. "Senator Farr," the official began, her voice shaking, "we've just received confirmation. The Harbinger fleet is real, and they're on their way." Farr didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've been telling you that. You didn't listen when we tried to warn you, but now it's too late for doubt." The official's face paled further. "We will mobilize the defense fleet immediately." "You were right, Senator. We can't waste time." "Time's already wasted," Farr replied bluntly. "Your fleet won't be enough. The Terran Armada, Earth's fleet, is the only thing that can stand against them. We can't wait for your ships to arrive. If you don't listen to us, Earth's fleet will handle it themselves. But we need your full support. Now." She hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Understood. I'll transmit the order to the defense forces at once. You'll have the Senate's support." Farr nodded curtly, then turned to Admiral Hale, who was already preparing the Terran Armada's battle plans. "You heard that," Farr said. "The Senate's mobilizing, but it'll be a while before they're ready. We need to act fast. The Harbingers are closing in." Admiral Hale turned to him, his face stern, but his eyes gleamed with the fire of a soldier who'd seen countless battles. "We don't have the luxury of waiting. The Armada's ready. Once we engage the Harbingers, we'll have to hit them hard and fast before they can regroup." Kyer moved beside them, his face filled with resolve. "This isn't just a fight for Earth anymore. If the Harbingers succeed, it's the entire galaxy they'll be hunting next. We can't let that happen." Farr looked between them, his mind racing with calculations and possibilities. "You're right. We need to make sure they know we're not backing down. This is our fight now. We'll push forward, but we need to hit them with everything we've got." He turned back to the holoscreen and activated a series of commands. On the screen, the vast fleet of the Terran Armada slowly shifted into formation, their sleek ships humming with energy. The enemy was close, too close. Far's fingers moved over the control panel, guiding their fleet into position. The dark ships of the Harbingers loomed just beyond the horizon, and there was no turning back now. "Signal the fleet," Far said, his voice tight. "Prepare for battle. Let them know Earth is back." The response came almost instantly. Admiral Hale's voice filled the command center. "Fleet is in position, awaiting your command." Far turned to the team, his face hardening. "This is it. We make our stand now." The tension crackled in the air as the fleet of the Terran Armada powered up. The hum of the engines reverberated through the station, sending waves of anticipation throughout the room. The warriors of Earth had been waiting for this moment for centuries, and now it was time to unleash the power of the fleet. Far stood tall, his mind clear despite the rush of adrenaline. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. This was not just a battle. This was the moment Earth's hidden legacy would be revealed to the galaxy. A quiet beep signaled that the enemy fleet was within striking range. "Fire when ready," Far ordered, his voice steady, unwavering. The room erupted into chaos as the command was given. The Terran Armada unleashed a barrage of fire that tore through the blackness of space, a violent storm of energy and destruction. The Harbinger ships scattered, their evasive maneuvers barely keeping them from taking the full force of the attack. But the Terran Armada had come prepared, and their weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Explosions filled the void as the first wave of Harbinger ships disintegrated in flashes of light. The terror the fleet had once inspired now turned into fear. This was not the end. This was just the beginning. Admiral Hale's voice rang through the command center, his tone cold but confident. "We've broken their formation. Keep the pressure on. We cannot afford to let them regroup." The battle had begun, and Far could feel the weight of every decision he had made weighing on him. There was no turning back. The deafening roar of weapon fire filled the void, accompanied by the rhythmic hum of the Terran Armada's engines as they surged forward into the chaos of battle. Far's hands gripped the edge of the command table, his eyes fixed on the holographic display. The battle was unfolding before him, a deadly dance between the Terran Armada and the Harbinger fleet. Every shot, every maneuver, every strategy. Each moment felt like it could determine the outcome of everything. Far's pulse quickened as another Harbinger ship shattered under the relentless barrage from the fleet. The wreckage drifted in space like a macabre monument to their defiance. The Harbingers had underestimated Earth's resolve, and now it was time for the galaxy to understand just what humanity was capable of. "Incoming," Kyer shouted from the side, his voice filled with urgency. Far barely had time to react before a massive Harbinger cruiser launched a salvo of missiles toward the heart of the fleet. The missiles streaked through the darkness of space, their deadly payloads aimed directly at the command ship, the Vanguard. The Terran Armada's defensive systems flared to life as shields flared up, blocking the first wave. But more were coming. "Admiral, brace for impact." Far barked, his heart racing. "Deploy countermeasures now." Admiral Hale's calm response came through the comms. "Countermeasures engage. Shields holding." The Vanguard rocked under the force of an impact, but the shields held firm. Far's eyes snapped back to the tactical screen as the Terran Armada's ships continued to pummel the Harbingers. Despite the chaos of the battle, the fleet's coordination was flawless, a testament to Earth's military ingenuity and readiness. But there was no time to rest. The enemy was regrouping, their superior numbers beginning to show. Far's mind raced with calculations. They were outnumbered, and the Harbingers had far more firepower than they'd anticipated. The longer the battle dragged on, the more Earth's fleet would be at risk. "Kyer, get me a direct line to the Senate," Far demanded, his eyes narrowing. Kyer immediately began working the controls, his fingers flying over the interface. "I'm opening the channel now." They'd been trying to contact us since the battle started. Farr took a deep breath, his face hardening. The Senate had finally realized the severity of the situation, but that realization came too late. Senator Farr, we've underestimated the Harbingers. The Senate official's voice crackled over the comms. You have our full support, but do you think you can hold them off long enough for reinforcements to arrive? Farr clenched his jaw. Reinforcements won't make it in time. You need to focus on the immediate threat. Evacuations, the people. This is bigger than just a military confrontation. This is the survival of our species. We need to keep the Harbingers from reaching Earth. The Senate official hesitated. But the fleet, they're pushing us to our limits. Farr's voice turned steely. Then push back harder. The Harbingers won't stop until they wipe us out. We either hold them here, or the galaxy will fall to their reign. Kyer cut in. Senator, Admiral Hale is requesting your presence at the command center. There's been a breach in their defense perimeter. We need to move now. Farr's expression hardened, and he turned toward the exit. Tell them I'm on my way. As he made his way to the heart of the vanguard, the echoes of the battle seemed to grow louder, reverberating through the very walls of the ship. The crew was in constant motion, their faces grim but determined, their focus unyielding as they worked together to coordinate the defense. Farr could hear the sound of fire coming from all directions, laser beams, plasma torpedoes, and the steady hum of shields deflecting impacts. Admiral Hale met him at the Central Command Station, a grim look on his face. Senator Farr, we got a serious problem. The Harbingers are starting to adapt to our tactics. Their fleet is coordinating better, and they figure out our shield frequencies. Farr's gaze flicked to the tactical display, where a number of enemy ships were circling like vultures, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. What's the status on our shields? Under pressure. They're starting to buckle, Admiral Hale said, his voice laced with frustration. Our fleet can't keep taking hits like this. Farr's mind raced. If they couldn't keep the shields up, they wouldn't be able to continue the fight. Earth's fleet was strong, but it wasn't invincible. He needed to act fast, before they were overwhelmed. We need to find a way to disrupt their coordination, Farr said, tapping his fingers on the table. If we can break their communication, even temporarily, we can throw them off balance. Get their fleet into disarray. Hale's brow furrowed. I don't know if we can get that close to their flagship. It's heavily guarded. Farr's eyes hardened. Then we make a distraction. We have one shot at this. Give me a small strike force and enough firepower to take down their communications. We'll hit them where it hurts. Admiral Hale nodded, determination in his eyes. Understood. I'll prepare a squadron. Farr turned to Kyer. Get the Senate to evacuate as many civilians as they can. We can't afford to lose Earth. We can rebuild the fleet, but we can't rebuild humanity. Kyer nodded quickly and began relaying orders to the Senate's command. Farr turned back to the Admiral. Get ready. We're going in. A few moments later, a small squadron of Vanguard's most elite pilots was assembled. They were Earth's best, fearless, relentless, and determined to protect their home no matter the cost. Their ships, equipped with the best technology Earth had to offer, prepared for a dangerous assault deep into the heart of the Harbinger fleet. Farr looked to them, his voice steady. We're going in fast and hard. Disable their communications, and we get out. No heroics. We've got one shot at this. The pilots nodded in unison, their faces filled with grim determination. For Earth, one of them said quietly. For Earth, Farr echoed, his heart heavy with the weight of what was at stake. The strike force's ships began to power up, their engines humming with anticipation. The battle outside raged on, but now, the real test of humanity's strength was about to begin. The strike force shot forward, cutting through the chaos of battle with surgical precision. Farr stood in the command center, his heart racing, watching the squadron's progress on the tactical screen. The Harbinger fleet loomed large in the distance, its dark hulks moving like predators circling their prey. The pilots were quick, staying in tight formation, weaving through debris and blasts of enemy fire as they made their approach. "Squadron, stay sharp. They're not going to make this easy for us," came the voice of Captain Hara, the leader of the strike force, over the comms. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a knowing that this mission could be their last. Far's hand tightened around the edge of the console as he watched them navigate through the enemy's defensive perimeter. Harbinger ships fired relentlessly, but the strike force's maneuvering was flawless. They were close now, so close to the enemy flagship, the Harbinger's massive central ship, where the communications hub was located. Warning: enemy reinforcements incoming. Kyer called out from his station, his eyes wide as he watched the tactical display. "They're bringing in more ships to intercept." Far didn't flinch. "We can't let them stop us. Push forward, Captain." "Understood," Hara replied, her voice steady. "All units, full speed ahead. Engage the enemy and keep them distracted." The strike force split into two groups. One would continue the assault on the Harbinger ships to hold their attention, while the other would dive straight for the communications hub. As Far watched the action unfold, his stomach churned with a mixture of anxiety and hope. They had only one chance to disrupt the Harbinger's coordination, to slow their momentum and give Earth's fleet a fighting chance. The group assigned to breach the communications hub raced forward, firing blasts of energy at enemy ships in their path. The Harbingers responded with vicious retaliation, unleashing a barrage of missiles and plasma fire, but the squadron was prepared. They swerved, dodged, and countered with incredible precision. The flagship grew nearer, its dark, imposing shape filling the screen. "Prepare to disable their communications relay," Far ordered, watching as the first of the strike force's ships came into position. The Harbinger flagship was surrounded by several smaller warships that created a nearly impenetrable defense, but Captain Hara's squadron was relentless. With a coordinated series of maneuvers, they tore through the outer defenses, drawing fire away from the key targets. "We've reached the relay. Ready to deploy EMP," Hara reported. "On your mark, Senator." Far's mind raced. He had only moments to decide. If they took down the communications, it would create confusion within the Harbinger ranks, but it could also alert the enemy to their intentions, making escape more difficult. "Now, Captain. Do it now," Far commanded. "EMP deployed." Hara's voice crackled over the comms, a touch of satisfaction in her tone. The surge of energy erupted from their ship, a brilliant flash that washed over the Harbinger flagship. For a brief moment, the Harbinger's communication systems went dark. Far watched as the tactical map of the battlefield shifted instantly. The enemy fleet faltered, as if they had lost their connection to their central command. "Direct hit," Kyer shouted, looking at his screens. "They've lost communication across their fleet. Their ships are scattered." Far's heart soared as he realized the scale of what they had just achieved. The Harbinger fleet was disoriented, their forces breaking apart. The chance to win this fight had just been given back to Earth's fleet. "All units, rally on the flagship. We've got them on the ropes now," Far barked, his voice filled with newfound confidence. Admiral Hale's voice cut through the comms. "We're striking now. Their defenses are compromised. We're going in for the kill." The Terran Armada, sensing the change in the tide, surged forward like a wave crashing against the shore. The Harbinger ships, now isolated and disorganized, were no match for the coordinated assault. The battle intensified, but the momentum had clearly shifted. As the strike force pulled back from the heart of the Harbinger fleet, the enemy flagship began to break apart under the relentless barrage from Earth's fleet. The communication hub was still down, and without it, the Harbinger forces were scattered, unable to mount an effective defense. Explosions lit up the void as the enemy ships crumbled, one by one. Captain Hara's voice came through again. "We've completed our mission. All units pulling out. We've got a window to retreat." Far exhaled deeply. The hardest part was done. They had struck at the heart of the Harbinger fleet and disrupted their cohesion. Now they just had to survive the fallout and make it out before the Harbingers regrouped. "Everyone, fall back to the fleet," Farr ordered, his tone sharp and decisive. "We've made our mark. Now let's finish this." As Earth's fleet began to regroup and chase down the remaining Harbinger forces, Farr's mind turned to the next step. This victory wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. They had fought for their survival, but now they would have to deal with the repercussions. The Harbingers would come back, and when they did, Earth's fleet would need to be ready for whatever they threw at them. The battle was far from over. But in that moment, as the Terran Armada pressed on, humanity had proven something no one could deny. Earth was not to be underestimated. As the fleet began to withdraw, the atmosphere was a mixture of cautious optimism and lingering tension. The mission had been a success, but Farr knew it was just a temporary reprieve. The Harbinger fleet wasn't just going to retreat. It would regroup, adapt, and return with even more ferocity. This was just the beginning of a far more complex and dangerous conflict. Farr stood in the command center, watching the fleet maneuver back into formation. He could hear the hum of activity around him, officers relaying orders, updating the status of their ships. He allowed himself a moment to breathe, but only for a moment. There was no time for complacency. "Senator," Kyer called, his voice tinged with urgency. "We've received a transmission from the Admiral. The Harbingers are already coordinating a counteroffensive." "They're not done yet." "Of course they aren't," Farr muttered under his breath, looking at the tactical map. It was a mess of flashing red dots indicating the remnants of the Harbinger fleet and the clusters of Earth's ships now reforming. He turned to Kyer. "What's the status of our communications?" "Lines are stable for now, but we've got limited time. They'll adapt to the EMP soon enough. The next wave will be much harder to fight off," Kyer replied. Farr clenched his fists, frustration bubbling up within him. They had disrupted the Harbingers, but they'd only scratched the surface of the real fight. He could see the reports coming in from various sectors. Earth's fleet had taken losses, and the Harbingers weren't going to let them enjoy this small victory. "Prepare the fleet for the next phase," Farr said. "We'll need to press on before they can regroup. Admiral Hale will need to know we've still got our edge." Kyer nodded and began relaying the orders to the rest of the fleet. Farr turned his attention back to the screen, tracking the movement of enemy vessels. Even now, the Harbingers were adjusting, moving in tight formations, positioning their ships for the next round. It wasn't just about brute force. It was about precision and tactics, things humanity had always excelled at, and something the Harbingers were learning to respect. The comms crackled again, and this time it was Admiral Hale's voice. "Senator Farr, we've picked up additional intel. The Harbingers have begun deploying long-range missiles, and they're sending a fleet of reinforcements. We're looking at a full-scale assault within the next few hours." Farr's eyes narrowed. A full-scale assault meant more than just an attack. It was a statement. The Harbingers were committing everything they had to finish what they had started. They'd underestimated humanity before, but now they were treating Earth's fleet as a serious threat. "Keep your defenses tight, Admiral. If they want to throw everything at us, then we'll show them what happens when they poke the hornet's nest. Let's make sure they regret this," Farr responded, his voice hardening. The plan was set in motion. Earth's fleet, battered but far from broken, readied itself for the next phase. Farr made his rounds, ensuring that the officers and commanders under his charge were fully briefed on the new strategy. They would need to fight as a unified force, using their ingenuity and determination to counter the Harbingers' sheer firepower. Farr also knew that their next move had to be calculated. They couldn't afford to let the Harbingers control the pace of the battle. The communication disruption had bought them time, but the next wave would test everything they had left. Farr's mind raced with possibilities. They could take the fight to the Harbingers and try to break their back before reinforcements arrived, but that would be risky. On the other hand, Waiting could give the Harbingers too much time to regroup and bring their full force to bear. He turned to Kyre. "We need to hit them where it hurts. Their reinforcements are coming, but if we can find their weak point, we can turn this battle in our favor." Kyre nodded, pulling up data on the enemy fleet. "If we can target their command ship, disable it, we might be able to destabilize the entire fleet. The Harbingers rely on centralized control. Without it, they'll be like a snake without a head." "Then that's where we go," Far said, his voice resolute. "We target their command ship, break their coordination, and let Earth's fleet mop up the rest." The next several hours were a blur of preparation, strategizing, and briefings. The tension was palpable, but Far could sense the determination in the air. His crew, his fleet, were ready. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about ensuring the survival of humanity, securing their place in the galaxy. The stakes had never been higher, and failure wasn't an option. Far gave one final glance at the tactical map before boarding his shuttle. The plan was in motion, and Earth's forces would strike hard. He could only hope that this time, the Harbingers would learn to fear humanity, not just for their strength, but for their will to survive and adapt. As the shuttle doors closed and the engines roared to life, Far's mind was already on the battlefield. This next strike would determine whether humanity could maintain its tenuous hold on victory, or whether they would be swallowed by the overwhelming force of the Harbingers. Either way, one thing was certain: the war for Earth's survival was far from over. The fleet, now mobilized and fully prepared, slipped into the blackness of space once again. The enemy would be waiting, but so would humanity. And this time, the Harbingers would face a force far more deadly than anything they could anticipate.